In this video, I'm going to show you how to reposition and resize the eyes. Hi again, Michael Volshinovich here from Vibrant Shot. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/vibrantshot and also at vibrantshot.com. So in this fourth in our series of eye retouching videos, we're going to cover essentially resizing and repositioning the eye. Now we're going to look at two different approaches for that, one of which uses the free transform tool and the other which uses the Liquify tool. And ultimately, it's going to be up to you which one you feel more comfortable working in, but generally I recommend the free transform approach just because it does give you a lot more control than the Liquify, and it also distorts the eye a lot less. So let's go ahead and get started. Basically what we're after is to enlarge the eye and, do something like this. Now obviously this is overdone. I think this is, the eyes look, ridiculously large, so we're not going to actually go that far, but just for the purpose of demonstration, I wanted to show you what we're after. Let's go ahead and zoom in here to a good amount. In this case, we're at 100%. I might back off a little bit. And the first thing we need to do for the free transform approach is to make a good selection. And that's where kind of the trick of it comes in, and it might require a few tries before you actually get there. But I do, again, recommend using a tablet for this. It makes it a lot easier to make the selection accurately. We're going to use our lasso tool here, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to highlight around the eye so that we get a decent amount of room below the eye here, and just enough room along the top where we cover all of the eyeshadow, but not so close to the eyebrow that we actually start to bleed into that. So basically what we need is a selection that is something like this, and you can be fairly liberal on the bottom of the eye. You don't really need to be too accurate there. And then just going right along the edge of the eyeshadow to something like that. Now we're going to hit Q for the quick mask, just as we've done in previous videos in this series. Go into Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And what you want to do here is to select a radius that, again, will soften that edge as much as possible without encroaching on either the eyelashes or the eyebrow. So in my case, 23 pixels looks to be a good amount. So we're going to click OK, hit Q again to apply a selection on that, and we're going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate that. Now that we've got a duplicate layer, we're going to hit Command or Control T, and that's going to bring up our transform mode. Now, when we actually scale this up, make sure you hold down the Shift and Option key together while you're scaling. What that will do is Option will make sure that it scales relative to the center point, and Shift will make sure that it scales equally in the height and width directions. So I'm just going to go up here until I think it looks good. Now for this, one thing you may want to do is just actually zoom out and just kind of get a feel for how it looks when the entire subject is visible. So in this case, actually, that looks pretty good, I would say. So it looks like we're at around 104%, and essentially what I'm going to do here is just change it to 104 so that we get that exact number. Okay, so there we go. We're going to hit Enter to apply that transform, and we're just going to look at it, and I think that looks pretty good. So now zooming back in again, we're going to repeat the same process on the other eye. So we're going to make our selection here. And I'm actually going to add a little bit here. I think I don't have enough. So let's just go ahead and just expand this selection a little bit. There we are. Okay, now I'm going to hit Q again. I can redo the same Gaussian blur because it's always going to show up at the top here. The last filter always shows up at the top. We're going to hit Q again. That's going to create our selection for us. Again, hitting Command J. And now what we're going to do is we're going to hit Command and Control T, but rather than actually scale it up, we're just going to change our numbers right here directly. So we know we were at 104%. So I'm going to enlarge it by the same amount. Now keep in mind that that is only applicable if the eyes were the same size to begin with. If you have one eye that is smaller than the other, then you'll actually want to size them differently. So at that point, you can just use the free transform and size it until they look the same. So I'm going to hit Enter there, and that basically takes care of that for us. Now what I want to do is just group these together. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, select both of these, and hit Command or Control G, and that's going to put them into their own group. Now we can just take a look and see how that looks. And I think that's not too bad, actually. So what we're going to do is just zoom in again, and actually I want to reposition the eyes just a little bit so that they are more symmetrical. So what we can do here is grab our ruler. Make sure you have a ruler visible at the top here. If you don't, you can go into View and Rulers. Just make sure that that's checked off. And once it is, what you can do is just drag from the top and go down, and that will give you a guide. So as you can see, this model actually does have a very symmetrical face, so we are pretty good in terms of position. And basically I just like to drop that there so I can see if the eyes are even at the same level. If they're not, what we can do is we can go in here, select one of the eyes, grab our move tool, and just nudging the eye up or down with the keys, we can just reposition it a little bit. I do think I want to bring it in slightly this way, so I'm just going to nudge it like so. And I think that looks pretty good, and actually this one I might shift out the other way. All right, so now let's zoom out. Let's get rid of our guides. So we're going to go to View, Clear Guides, toggle that on and off, and I think that's looking pretty good. So keep in mind that you can only move things a certain amount and enlarge them a certain amount before you actually start to see what was on the layer below, because obviously it's still there. If we take this off, that eye is still there. So if we move this too far, we're actually going to start seeing the other edge of that eye. So just be careful of that. Whereas with the Liquify, you don't really have that restriction. So let's close this up and look at our Liquify approach. So for that, what I do recommend doing is creating a duplicate of your image. So grab your layer and hit Command J. And now we're going to go into Filter and Liquify. So Liquify is a great tool. It gives you the ability to sculpt a person's face, body, whatever it might be, but it can also give you the power to destroy a person's face or body. So you really have to be careful here to make sure that you don't go overboard. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to repeat something similar, and basically we're going to try and just enlarge both eyes and then just nudge this eye over a little bit. Now, because I generally don't want to affect certain elements, I'm going to use the freeze mask to make sure I don't mess around with them. So to highlight the to use the freeze mask, just select the freeze mask option over here, and it's essentially going to give you a pen. So what we're going to do is just draw over the eye, and just the eyebrows. We're just going to cover them so we don't actually affect them. Unless, of course, you want to actually change the shape of the eyebrows, in which case you wouldn't do this. And I'm probably just going to go, along this portion of the nose here either. I don't really want to change the shape of this. Okay. So basically anything that is in this red mask will not be touched by the Liquify process. Now what we want to do is, first we're going to actually shift the eye over. So we're going to grab our nudge tool. That's the first one at the top here, or they call it the forward warp tool. And just make sure that your brush is a good size. Like you want it something like this so that it grabs the whole eye in one shot. And because we have our freeze mask here, we don't really have to worry about it, changing the actual eyebrow. So basically what we're going to do is just grab it and just pull a little bit in one direction. Now, as you can see here, it's not going to do things evenly, so you're actually going to slightly distort the shape of the eye. And again, this is another reason why I prefer to use the free transform tool, because here it's a much less scientific process. You just have to kind of intuitively move it a little bit, move it from one edge, move it from the other edge until you get the result you want. So basically I've nudged it a little bit there. Now actually we're going to do the enlarging portion of it. Actually, I'm going to nudge this one over that way as well. So let's just enlarge this, just shift this over, and then I'm just going to pull this side a little bit and then pull this side in. So basically I'm just using my open bracket and close bracket keys, the square brackets, to enlarge and decrease the size of my brush. So now that we've actually moved them over, let's go ahead and grab the expansion tool over here, or they call it the bloat tool. And again, we're going to pick a fairly large size and just give it a couple of dabs here until you think it looks good. Now with this one, you do have to find a brush density and a pressure and rate that works for you. Essentially the rate, if we crank this up and we hold it down, it just really quickly enlarges things. So we don't really want that. I try and keep the rate fairly small to around 14 or so, and just make individual clicks down. Don't hold it down, because you won't get the control if you hold it down. It's better to click 3 or 4 times, click 3 or 4 times on the other eye. That way you can be sure that it's more or less enlarging by the same amount. So I think I'm pretty good with that. We're going to click OK. That's going to apply that change for us, and there we go. So we have shifted it over and enlarged it at the same time. But again, as you can see with this one, we actually went a little bit further with it. We actually made it a little bit bigger. But I think in general, the process is a lot more controlled and a lot more repeatable. Whereas with Liquify, it's hard to kind of visualize where you are and where you've come. Whereas with Free Transform, it's fairly straightforward. So I hope you found that helpful. Now, one thing I do recommend is that whenever you are changing the shape of eyes or just general facial elements, make sure you do that at the beginning of your editing, because ultimately if you're going to start dodging and burning on top of that, you want to make sure that you don't actually have to change your masks on your dodge and burn and things of that nature later on, because you're actually changing the facial shape. You want to do that up front before you do anything else, and also obviously before you do any sharpening. So naturally, when we're enlarging something, we are going to lose a little bit of sharpness. So what you can do is, for example, with these ones, we can group these layers together, hit Command E. That will group them into one layer, and now we can apply all of the sharpening steps that we talked about in part 1. So I do hope you found that useful, and go ahead and practice these techniques on your own images and ultimately decide which one works better for you. Now, to make sure you don't miss part 5 of this video series, subscribe to our YouTube channel below, and also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/vibrantshot. Bye for now.